I'm joined now by Ryan of the band Aanthems, Vancouver-based punk organization of two, as I understand. You and your brother Jeff, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
That is correct. Now, you guys have been around as Aanthems since what, like 2015-ish?
Yeah, we were another band before that. So Jeff and I have been playing since 97 maybe as a two-piece, which is a pretty long run. And we kind of recorded this EP that ended up becoming Anthem's first EP, but we actually had released it previously as the other band, and a bunch of life stuff came up, and it had a different sound than anything we'd done before, and we were like, I think it's time to retire this name and come up with something that people might be able to remember.
Right.
A little better.
So we won't even get into what the name of that band was, but your debut full-length album came out March 8th, called Blood Fortune. I just gotta say, thanks for keeping the streak alive for me, because 2018, my album of the year went to The Dirty Nil with Master Volume. 2019, my album of the year went to Pup with Morbid Stuff.
Oh, wow.
And I'm telling you, man, this album for 2020, it's going to be hard to beat for me personally. It is that good. I cannot stop listening to it. So first of all, congrats on making an old punk real happy with new music.
Well, that is some very high praise. I'm a little speechless. Thank you. Those are some big records in my world.
I don't know what else to say about it. Like, it literally just hits all the right spots for me. For whatever reason, you've hit on a lot of the influences that I have. Like, I hear elements of so many different artists in your sound that when combined just becomes an altogether beast on its own.
This is thank you very much. This is my favorite thing. To be honest, I'd really like to hear, because it's hard for me to say like, oh, we sound like this or that, because we really don't lean on anything in particular too hard, and any kind of influences that are, noticeable are not on purpose. And people have told me all kinds of different things, and sometimes it's bands I've never listened to. So
right.
If you have a list, I would love to hear.
I actually do have a list if you want to hear. So,
okay.
I mean,
I do.
there's elements of Minor Threat and Fugazi, the Ian MacKaye stuff. There's Walter from Gorilla Biscuits and Quicksand and Youth of Today, along with Tom Capone's. I'm trying to remember right off the top of my head. I think it's Fake City. The guitar in that, technically bass, I suppose, in your case, because there is no guitar in the band, right? It's bass and drums,
right?
But the little giggets, the Quicksand giggets.
Yeah, Quicksand was a big one.
Yeah, eh?
Quicksand was a big one for us. We actually got a chance to see them. I've seen them a couple times, and we got to see them at this really small little, it was called the Nappy Dugout. And it was this like little indoor skate park that's set up by PD, who runs PD's Hot Shop and Skull Skates, if you're familiar with that brand of skateboarding counterculture, or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And we got to see them. They played, like, the stage was the flat bottom of the half pipe, and the place could fit maybe like 100-ish people, and it was like shoulder to shoulder packed, and saw a lot of great shows there. But yeah, Quicksand, that was a pretty cool one to see there.
That is like beyond mind-boggling to me. I could only imagine seeing Quicksand in an environment like that. I'll keep rhyming off a couple other here. I hear The Refused in there. I hear Off With Their Heads. Propane. I don't know. Are you familiar with Propane? Yeah. I just the heaviness of Propane.
I know of Propane.
Okay.
Yeah. the funny thing with Off With Their Heads is I didn't really like, I listened to them a little bit, and it's been pretty recent, like maybe not even, before we'd written this record. And I find on Spotify, if you listen to like Anthems radio, it's like more Off With Their Heads songs than Anthem songs. So
Right.
there must be some kind of connection there. But we did get to play with them a little while back, and they were really great. Great guys and great band. I like them a lot.
Nice. And then kind of my round off to this, it's an odd one. And I think maybe it has to do, I've heard you describe the band as, yeah, we're kind of like this progressive, heavier punk style, but we also have an appreciation for the anthemic kind of 70s, 80s like rock bands that are out there. And somebody else that I find kind of encapsulates that, and I don't know why I keep drawing back to it, is Andrew WK, because there's the fun element to the music as well.
Yeah, I love Andrew WK.
Nice.
Yeah, that first record anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge one for me. I do own that, the deluxe vinyl version of that record. It's yeah, it's fun. It's really fun and just so kind of heavy. I saw Andrew WK at least once. I feel like it might be more than that, but the thing that really struck me about him is that after the show he just hung out and just stayed until the last person left, and like anybody that wanted to talk to him, he just hung out, and he was so excited to like talk to anybody about anything, and just the coolest guy. And he really just like, he wasn't trying to rush off at all. People are just eventually, once everybody had talked to him and was kind of finished, he just said goodnight everybody, and like disappeared into the night.
I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, 'cause I don't wanna die unsung. And I'm straining for the bottom rung, and I am not the only one. I'm bleeding in the place I'm from, I'm gonna carry weight me down. And I'm breathing through a plastic straw, since everything will be at the drown. It's a ring game, working to pay, live hand to mouth and then feeling the shame. Saving all day, all in to pay, lose to the cross, don't it won't go away. Cash in the throat, we are unchoked, living our lives with our hands round our throats. I can't stop screaming at the top of my lungs, 'cause I don't wanna die unsung. And I'm straining for the bottom rung, and I am not the only one. I'm bleeding in the place I'm from, the death carry weighs me down. I'm breathing through a plastic straw, since everything will meet on the drown. No living wage, work like a slave, taking a beating, releasing the rage. Rip out the page, tear up the stage. It's every country inside of this cage. Nowhere to go, breathe what you sow. Pitchforks are coming, we will overthrow. Back to the corner by my favorite things. Whoa! Say you can fly with a clip on your wings. Whoa! The weight of this load keeps us under the thumb. Whoa! Standing alone, we will not overcome. Whoa! So I keep screaming at the top of my lungs, 'cause I don't wanna die unsung. And I'm straining for the bottom rung, and I am not the only one. I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, 'cause I don't wanna die. Passion! Passion!
So you and Jeff are both family men, and was there plans when the album was released to actually tour it, to actually get out on the road for it?
Not, I wouldn't say like the way that you would expect, from a professional, quote unquote, professional band. We are like full hobbyists. So we play a lot and we do a lot of stuff. So we're really busy. Like we play, at least one show a month kind of thing locally. And then there's a bunch of places around, like we'll head up to like Squamish or, sometimes Calgary, Edmonton, that type of thing.
Right.
That's kind of the phase that we're at, but we were planning on expanding a little bit. But definitely not like full tour cycle.
Okay.
I mean, we'd like to, but we're pretty happy with our lives, and if we don't have to give them up too much, then that would be fantastic.
Right.
That's our win-win.
Absolutely. I want to touch on a few songs. I'm going to play a triple shot from the album today. If things keep going the way that they're going, I'm likely just going to play the entire album start to finish one day. It's one of those things that I've done it a couple of times to highlight some local artists in Thunder Bay, but I've never done it with anybody outside of town.
Wow.
So
Okay.
if there's one album right now that I'm going to do that with, it's likely going to be this one, but I'm going to start with a triple shot and
thank you.
see how far that takes me. But there's a few songs that I want to touch on. One song in particular is Pure Fire.
Okay.
Because I was actually surprised when I heard Pure Fire that it wasn't the title of the album. It seemed fitting. But then I realized, I went and kind of looked back through the back catalog. Pure Fire is a couple years old now, isn't it?
Yeah. So this record took us a long time to make. There was a whole lot of things that happened in life, after it was meant to actually be an EP.
Okay.
But because of, things stalling and then, just like stuff around the house, I had to I moved into a new place and I had to basically gut the whole thing. And yeah, it was that took about a year and a bit.
Right.
So yeah, we got pushed back a lot, but the whole time that this is happening, there's a guy in the city here, Vancouver, called Russian Tim, who he has this very sort of like, he's got a very business sense to him in that in the way he schedules things. I don't want to say that he's a full businessman in the way he looks at punk rock, but he is the way he schedules things for sure. And he has these festivals that he's been doing. And he, it would be like his local highlight bands. And then he started bringing in other bands now from, touring bands that he just set up the Pairs show it's canceled.
Right.
It was supposed to happen and that kind of thing. And he had this festival, and every time he would do that, he would want to release, and he would do like a compilation. And there's a Spotify playlist that he's got that's all Vancouver bands and stuff like that. But anyway, he had these releases, and he would keep saying like, okay, well, you guys are going to play this festival and we need a release. So kind of ended up getting like sort of one song done at a time, because he would sort of push us to keep doing
right.
to keep making stuff happen, which is fantastic, because we really would not have probably got anything done on our own. So his coaching has helped us to kind of keep things on schedule a little better. But that's how that sort of happened. Pure Fire, yeah, that was like the first one that came out on I forget which Rocket from Russia Fest record that would have been, but a couple of years ago anyway.
Now, that was the song that when I listened to the album start to finish after hearing We Don't Want That, and when it got to Pure Fire, just the chorus screaming our goddamn heads off at the show.
Yeah. That's really what the shows are like here, and it's the scene in Vancouver is incredible and supportive, and yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that it's the thing that keeps us going, because I don't think that I'll ever stop but it certainly makes it worthwhile. It's incredible. Like, I never experienced the level of people knowing every word, knowing every part, all the synchronized fist pumps and all the craziness, and then you get sweaty hugs for days after every show.
Right.
It's a beautiful thing. So that song is a love letter to the scene, really, and a greater message to other places where things similar to that exist. This is Ryan from Aanthems. You're listening to CILU 102.7 FM. This is Pure Fire.
So I wanted to touch on a couple of things here because you guys harken back to the DIY style of punk, and in the fact that you mixed the album yourself, correct?
Yeah, I did everything. I did the artwork. I'm really very, very hands-on with anything that I work on. Like, for example, we're pressing records right now, and we actually paused the press for a couple reasons. And one is we really didn't want to release, any merch in a time when people are struggling financially, across the board. It seemed like kind of a dick move. But the test presses are actually pressed. I have them in hand. The press is in town here, and I was talking to Billy, who runs Clampdown, and I managed to talk him into letting me come in and help press the actual records myself. So
nice.
That could be seen as quite annoying, but that's the level of commitment I have to it. Is I just want to be a part of everything.
That's awesome. Another thing that I wanted to touch on with regards to the sound and the style of Aanthems, I mentioned earlier there's no guitar in the band. It's bass, but you play through a guitar amplifier, right?
Yeah, I use two, actually. I have two half stacks that I play through, and they both sound just a little bit different, and it kind of, the sound between them sounds pretty damn good, I think.
It does, and it's kind of like a reverse Josh Homme, right? Like Josh Homme and Caius played guitar through bass amps instead to get that kind of like grungy sound.
Yeah. I found because I'm playing a bass, there's a lot of inherent low end in the strings already because they're quite thick, right?
Right.
And so I'm playing a lot of chords and stuff, and I find that the more low end that I have in my sound, the more things get kind of muddy and gross. So
Right, you lose it a little
I'm
bit.
actually like, yeah, so I actually kind of like go for more low mid rather than actual bass. And I find it is interesting. A lot of people who are reviewing the record are saying that it's like, you know, or have heard us live, or, oh, it's really bass heavy and crazy. And like bass heavy might be a fair way to describe the amount of bass that's on the record, like instrument bass, but
Mhm.
sonically it's doesn't have a lot of low end in it. There's a lot of like room for a really punchy kick, which I really go for. That's where all the low end comes from, is the kick.
Right. And had I not read that, I would have no clue. I completely honest. I would think, okay, just that's his guitar sound. Having read that it was bass played through guitar amplifiers and
Yeah,
kind of circumventing the effect pedal, so to speak, I guess. It's a very cool, we'll call it trick, as you just said. But it creates a very unique sound. And I think that's what, it's one of the things that jumped out at me. It's a fresh sound. It's a different take, if you will, on the punk rock sound.
yeah, it's it kind of gets into a little more heavy, maybe even almost doomy kind of metally sort of sounds, or hardcore or something like that.
Right.
But yeah, I the first I obviously started with bass amps, and but generally speaking, the sound of a bass tone is really scooped. Like you might get some nice grindy sounds from the top end, but then you're really pushing the bottom end and trying to suck out all the mid. And my setup is like the exact opposite. It's boosting the mid, and you know, like the really high end of a bass doesn't really sound that fantastic, and the low end, like I said, kind of muddies things up a little. So just kind of giving that mid push just gives it a real nice punch.
Right.
Also, if you play like an acoustic bass, like a guitar style acoustic bass, that's very close to what my sound is like.
Right.
Yeah, that's actually the instrument that I first figured out how to kind of, the first step in this direction was playing acoustic bass, and I played those for a long time.
That's very cool.
And when I mentioned earlier that we sort of made this new record, or the first EP, which turned out to be Old Dogs, the sound was quite different. I had actually picked up an acoustic, or an electric bass that has an acoustic pickup, like a piezo pickup on the bridge.
Okay.
And that was kind of something that I thought would be easier to tour with and to deal with. And I did some modifications on that, and that's still my main bass that I'm using now. I've actually worn a hole in it, which is kind of a point of pride for me. But
Nice.
yeah, so that was the difference in sound that kind of like kicked things up a notch, and we went a lot heavier, which is not normally what people do as they get older.
Right.
Going a little backward. This is Ryan from Aanthems, and you're about to hear We Don't Want That on CILU 102.7 FM.
Soldiers, and as we evolve, one race for survival.
Welcome back to In Case You Missed It. Hour 2 of the show is brought to you by our friends down at the Foundry. And if you're just tuning in, I've been airing my interview that I did earlier this week with Ryan from the band Aanthems out of Vancouver, BC, and having a bit of a listening party for their stellar new album, Blood Fortune. So let's dive back in. As opposed to the technical side of things, I want to talk about the songwriting a little bit, because despite the heaviness of your sound and of the album, and kind of like the political nature of it to a certain extent, it is unmistakably hopeful. The album has this hopeful vibe to it. I'm still at a loss for words as to how to properly describe it, but the best I can do is really kind of harken back to the hardcore days of like the 80s and even into the 90s, where you had this really, really aggressive sound that wrapped up in all that. If you listen to the words, you're going to get a completely different message than what you perceive from the outside. Is that intentional on your part?
Yeah. I mean, I think that both Jeff and I are inherently positive people. So I was always interested in songs like, like Suicidal Tendencies has like, You Can't Bring Me Down, right?
Yep.
Stuff like that. I always appreciated like, it's funny that you say that that this record is overly positive, or it has that feel to it, because I kind of worried that we had maybe gone a little bit too negative on this one. But yeah, it's important to try, like in everything you do. If you're not going to try or care or make an effort, you just shouldn't do it. And, we're both married and we have kids now and stuff like that. And so we're not going to write songs about girls and relationships. We're both in a very excellent situation in those terms. So, what are you going to write about beyond that? And it just seems like overcoming injustice is the most natural idea that comes into my head. So yeah, I'm really glad that it comes across that way. I like to shine a light on things that are terrible but not just say this sucks, to say like there's got to be a way we can fix this, if not, offer an actual solution, right?
Right.
But usually the answer is coming together and working together and just taking step by step. So there's a lot of that idea of just like people coming together and being a force as one. That's kind of the idea.
It's kind of the general punk rock way, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's definitely enough people who, the other end of punk rock would be the middle fingers everywhere, and
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this on the show here, but I won't. I'll try not.
We're recording. I can bleep it.
Oh yeah. Well, I try not to swear on the record either, to be honest.
Welcome
one of the other things that I wanted to touch on too is there is some pretty distinctly different vocal tracks on the album. I don't want to kind of pigeonhole it or anything, but you have your sound, you have the kind of natural way that you belt something out in a lot of the heavier songs. But then there's other songs like Crisper that have...
Yeah, that's Jeff, actually.
Is that Jeff? Okay, I wasn't sure because in a lot of the descriptions of the music, I mean, there is credit for both of you, but one is howling, and I believe that was the way that you described Jeff, right?
Yeah, he's got a different... I don't know, maybe I'm more screamy and shouty, and he's a little more yelpy, maybe. I don't know if that's
right. His voice reminds me of a cross between Dave Smalley from All and Down by Law and bands like that.
Okay.
And Jim from Pennywise. He has that like quality to his voice, and I love the way that the album still has this cohesive feel, but all of a sudden it's like, whoa, that's a different vocal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's I think Jeff has an amazing voice, and we always he did backups like in every song, and we never really talked too much about. We didn't always sing the same thing. When he was doing backups, he would write his own line, and as long as it would sort of fit with the theme of what the song was going on, because he didn't always claim to know what the song was about. He'd just throw a line out there, and sometimes it would be amazing. But yeah, we started collaboratively writing lyrics a little bit. Like I still, I'm a much better editor than creative, I think, and he's the other way around. He can just pull anything out of the air at any time, and it's pretty amazing. And for me, I have to keep like a note going constantly, where if I think of a line or a word or something that I think could be used later, I'll put it down, and then when it comes time to putting the thing together, I'll stitch it all together and then fill in the blanks, kind of thing.
Nice.
But for Jeff, when we'll be playing a new song, like just a new riff or whatever, and he'll just sing a verse, like just out of the air, and he won't write anything down. And then I'll have to get him to do that so that we can go over it, before we record. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. So I've been encouraging him to sing more. Some partly because with me shouting all the time, it really becomes impossible to do an entire show at that level.
Right.
So to have a break of him singing from a couple of songs helps a lot. And yeah, he's really kind of surprised me in a lot of ways. The stuff that he decides to write about. Was it CRISPR we were just talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, I see. He decides he wants to write a song about like human genome editing, and where that might take us as a species, and if that's a good idea or not. And then he writes like this poppy, like very sing along style, and it's really clever, I think. And yeah, I mean, I got to give him a lot of credit for that. But yeah, he's done a fantastic job.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned the sing-along side of things, because the first song that jumped out at me when I heard CRISPR, and especially because I had mentioned, kind of has Jim from Pennywise's vocal quality a bit on that song, is Bro Him. Like the ultimate like sing-along, howl-along song. And between CRISPR and Unsinkable Ships,
yeah,
you've got, I mean, you're living up to your name here, right? With the anthemic songs that are just, they're sing-along songs at their heart, right?
Well, I'm glad it's working. We certainly try and set the bar high, and then see if we can live up to it. So I'm glad you think so. Hey, this is Ryan from Aanthems. You're listening to CILU 102.7 FM, and this is CRISPR.
I wish I had a bigger voice and bigger platform to shout this from, because it really is that album to me. I'm not just here blowing smoke for the sake of blowing smoke. This is something that resonated with me. And when I first listened to the album straight through, I was talking to my wife, my 5-year-old sitting there, and I just lifted my arm up and I had goosebumps like all down my arm. It's like I've been transported back to the mid 90s hardcore shows when I first discovered punk in general. And it brought me back there immediately. And you've managed to keep me there for almost a month solid now. So thank you for that.
Well, I'm really happy we could do that for you. We're certainly trying to do the same thing for ourselves.
I got something to say to you, but you can't hear me. I'm talking to. We're in a sick, or it's a trick, and we are falling. You brickwalling me, and I'm so walking you. Now the only way to deal is to force it through, to make it death with self-consent. It's all that we can do. How have we forgot of all those lessons taught? I'm a shared mind of man. Give us all the good we got, and we've got so lost. I'm not enough too often. We just keep on walking till we drop into a coffin. You're being sold a line, I'm being sold one too, but it's not the same one. We gotta find the truth, the benefits that exist well beneath the small screen. There is a master plan, it's not hard to see. It's ladies bearing down, it's how they succeed. They divide, live and sever, those who stand together. Hey, I talk to you, but you don't hear a thing. You think I'm full of shit, so you're not listening. Or how have we forgot of all those lessons taught? I'm a shared mind of man. Give us all the good we got, and we've got so lost. Abandoned hope so often. We just keep on walking out. I got something to say. You got ideas too. There was a common ground that we once knew. I'll listen to you, you listen to me. That's how we'll fix this thing. I'll listen to you, you listen to me. That's how we'll fix this thing. Backwater, I can't sleep for ages. Old time bad guys sleep from the pages. And we eliminate what goes around, but they just want to keep it. Walked on the ground like a dirty little secret. They keep it chip tight. Drowning in waves of the self-serving lies. On the toe hearts trying to keep hope alive. I got it if you need it. It doesn't kill you, it makes you get stronger. Holding out but forever feels longer. I'm not giving in. Progress is a war won in inches. Not radical, but met with resistance. There's no small way. Drowning in waves of the self-serving lies. On the toe hearts trying to keep hope alive. I got it if you need it. Don't get what you came for. It only ends when we all let it die. Push a little harder and we all make it right. Go on and lift it up. Born every morning and we die every night. Nobody past you alone in the fight. It's all adrenaline. We must stop throwing money for spark. Soldiers of fortune, it only gets worse. So here we go again. No more secrets. No more lies. We are the blinking. Open your eyes. No more secrets. No more lies. We are the blinking. Open your eyes. This is so unbelievable. This we are on unsinkable ships. This is so unbelievable. This we are on. We're unsinkable ships. This is so unbelievable. This we are on. Unsinkable ships. This is so unbelievable. This we are on. Unsinkable. Progress is a war won in inches. Not radical, but met with resistance. There's no small way. Drowning in waves of the self-serving lies. On the toe hearts trying to keep hope alive. I got it if you need it. Don't get what you came for.
In the same token, Red Hands to close off the album.
Yeah.
If you don't sing along with the woes in that, there's something wrong with you. It doesn't make sense to me. If you don't immediately want to jump in and start screaming along with that song, I don't know that we can be musical friends.
That's awesome. I that song actually almost didn't make the record. We were having a really hard time with trying to figure out how to play certain parts of it, and it was coming crunch time, and we were getting right to the end, and I think we actually recorded the entire, like, that version that's on the record, like maybe less than a week before we had to hand in the masters, or to be mastered rather.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it came very close. We gave it like one last chance, and we went back and we had to like redo, from scratch. So yeah, that was a bit of a panic. And I mean, there's still things in that song where listening to it now, I'm like, I wish I had a little more time with it, but it had to happen. We have a tendency, we basically needed a new closer is what we needed. So that was it.
And honestly, I was just about to say that as a closer is, like, I couldn't imagine the album without it finishing on that note. I've listened to the album through and through enough times now. Without Red Hands at the end, it would feel incomplete now that I've heard it that way. Yeah,
well, I guess lucky for everyone, huh?
Well, listen, I want to thank you for your time. This has been a blast. I want to thank you for this album because, especially right now, I didn't discover it right at the start of March when it came out. I didn't kind of click into it until the start of April-ish.
Okay.
And it's actually caused me a bit of a issue with recording my show because I want to include a song every week from the album, and every time I start playing the album, it's impossible for me not to listen to the entire thing from start to finish. So thanks for the rough go of things.
Yeah, well, that's thank you so much. I mean, this is the highest level of success, to be honest, that I had ever wanted to achieve, that just somebody cared about our record, and this is really big for us, and thank you very much. Hi, this is Ryan from Aanthems. You're listening to CILU 102.7 FM. This is Red Hands from our album Blood Fortune.
Absolutely stellar. That was Red Hands by Aanthems off of their new album, Blood Fortune. A big thank you to Ryan for spending the time with me to chat about it. It truly is that album for me this year. And I know I mentioned it in the interview, but going back to 2018 with The Dirty Nil and Master Volume being my album of the year, and then last year, Pup and Morbid Stuff being my album of the year, this one, as I mentioned, is going to be hard to beat this year. I love everything about this album, and it keeps the Canadian streak of favorite albums going. Point of pride right there. You're listening to In Case You Missed It on CILU 102.7 FM.